Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Traditional Bowhunting and Wilderness Podcast. This is Jason Samkoviak, and I'm going to show you a couple of tips for when you have a longbow, a couple of tips to make it for setup and things that make it easier for you. One of the first things we're going to talk about with it is going to be one of the things I think is really cool if you hunt from a tree stand a lot. What I've done here is I have a built-in arrow holder for when it's on windy days out there. The wind blows your bow around and it's hanging there flopping in a tree. And many of you know that arrow will fall off of that rest on you when you're on the tree, when it's hanging up in a tree if the wind starts blowing. What I've done is basically just taken a piece of a zip tie. Now, if you'll notice, I shoot a piece of, this is just black rubber bicycle inner tube is all that I use on there for a grip. I took the leather grip off. I like the rubber. It seems to be better for me for, it's a little stickier and grippier. It's more waterproof. It doesn't hold scent as well. There's a lot of little variables and reasons I like it better, but it works really good for me. Now, what I've done is I've actually taken a piece of zip tie and I slid it right down in here, just like this, just a piece of zip tie. And I take that zip tie and I stick it right in there and I leave it in there all the time. It sits right down in the handle. Now what I can do with it is when I get into a windy day, I'll pull that up and I'll leave it just sit up a little bit like that. Now what it does for me is when I put that arrow on there, it prevents that arrow from falling off the bow shelf when it's windy out. When I go to shoot and I grab my bow and my arrow's on there, just before I go to shoot, I just take my finger and I push that down out of the way just like that, and then I'm ready to shoot and it doesn't interfere. Sometimes I'll even forget to push it all the way down, and when I shoot it doesn't matter. Your feathers are not going to be affected by that, but it works really good to help keep the arrow from falling off your arrow rest or off the shelf when you're actually shooting. Now, sometimes I will forget that, or if I've lost it or whatever the case is, what you can do as well too when you're actually in the woods in those kind of situations is just take a piece of stick that you just break off of the tree right there where you're at, slide that back, stick it right in there like this. It will hold that arrow on there as well too and keep that arrow from falling off. And just before you shoot, just flick the stick out and then you're ready to draw it and you're ready to go. So that's kind of a key thing. I love doing that. You can do it with a leather rest or leather grip if you have one too. I don't have any leather grip bows anymore to show you, but what I did is I just bought some pins that you get right at a clothing store, but they're that short little pin with a big round, like a black ball on the end of that pin, and just stuff it right down in there so that ball would sit right here next to your shelf. That ball would give enough resistance against that shaft to keep it from wanting to pop off of there. So it worked really, really good in that aspect too. And again, it doesn't affect arrow flight at all, but it puts that little hump right there to keep your arrow on the shelf when it's blowing around in the wind. So nice little tip for you. I haven't figured out a way to do that on a recurve bow yet, or on a all wood handle without a grip on there. Like my wife's bow, we actually just have an arrow rest or an arrow holder that just a piece of it just self sticks on the back of the riser and it wraps around and it holds her arrow. That's the only thing I found on one of those. But if you have a grip of some sort, whether it be leather or rubber, that's a nice way to keep the arrow on the shelf and not have it fall off on you on windy days. Another thing too, on a longbow, I'm going to take this off so you can see it, but on a longbow, I like using these rubber tip protectors on there because I set it down on the end all the time, that kind of thing. Usually these are much longer and they come up and they cover more of the limb, and they also hold the string. It's used like a string keeper and it holds the string on the actual knock of the lower limb. Problem I have with those is I don't like how the string keeps that rubber open and lets water get in there. I hunt in the rain a lot, use my other bow for bow fishing, whatever the case is, but I don't like how water can accumulate in the bottom of that and sit there and cause havoc on the tip on my lower limb. So what I've done is I make my own bowstrings, and I started making my lower loop really, really tight. And what that does is it makes it so it's its own string keeper. That string will not come off of there on its own. It is actually, that loop is so tight that it won't come off, and I like that. What it allows me to do then is it allows me to cut these tip protectors off. So I cut them really short like that, and that way it only covers that and I don't have to worry about that being open. There is no exposure anywhere around that for water or moisture to be able to even get inside of that. So another little tip for you, if you make your own strings, you can try it without too, but you might want to put a rubber band, or like what I've done on my wife's bows, I'll put one of these on there and they're recurved, and then I take the piece that I cut off of that and I cut a strip out of it so it's like a rubber band, and I put that piece up here to hold the string. So I'll have a string keeper. And then sorry, I'm out of camera there. So I'll cut that one on her bow. I'll cut a short one, and then I'll have another piece, that piece that I cut, I'll take a section of it and I'll put it around here as a string keeper to hold the string on. And then I have the tip protector, which is, again, sealed all the way around so there's no water that can get into there. So kind of a nice little tip for you to, if you're hunting in wet conditions. Another thing too is a lot of us, we all need a stringer to string our bows with. One of the things I do, which is pretty cool, so that my stringer always stays with it here, you can see, is I actually just wrap my stringer around her. When I'm done shooting, I take and I put my string cup on the lower limb, and then what I do is I come up to the top limb up here, and when I'm all done shooting, let me pull it apart here so I can show you, but when I'm done, I set it in the lower limb pocket, I take the top of this, and I just go right up to where the string is here, and I wrap it around 3 times, 2 times, each one of them is different. This one I go 2 around, flip it around here twice, and then I just kind of hang it right over the top of the upper limb, and it keeps it nice and tight. So now my stringer is always with my bow, and it's an actual string keeper that keeps that string from coming off or from sliding down and getting out of shape. So it makes it a nice, simple, compact package. Your stringer's right there with you all the time. It's not going to come off or get knocked out of the way. So works really good. So that's basically just a couple little tips for you about setting up a longbow so that it, makes things a little easier, makes life a little easier. And thanks for watching. We'll be back with more soon. Thanks. Bye.